We were just chatting with her the other day about our reading. This is on. And all of the people who are on, and Betsy, your sister's on. Did you know that?
Oh, you can see her?
Yes, she's right there.
That's Ann. This is
Yes.
my sister Ann.
No, you stand up.
That's Kathy and that's Ann.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kathy's.
That's Kathy. Hi, Kathy.
Right here. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Kathy.
Ann.
Hi, Ann. We're having fun.
My sisters are on Zoom, so we're going to just say hi, Kathy. Okay, ready? Hi, Ann. Hi. Lori, Ella. Good to see you guys. You can see them on the other Remember the good old days?
Yes.
100-mile. Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, but I didn't do that. But I supported him. Yeah, I don't remember. There must have been two. So there was the one where everybody ran 1 mile. And then Pam's old Hamkeys talked about one where they ran every 10th mile. I did the Philippides 100-mile relay. Yeah, I didn't do that. Pam did that. That's right. Okay. Bye. Can't hear you.
Okay, get out of the picture.
All right, this is all in the way. You always wore a hat, didn't you? You always had a baseball cap on. Because didn't you come back and Kerry Ward was training you or something? I was in the Navy. Yeah, I served for 25 years. I retired, and then I became a civil servant. Came back to DC. There we go. That was Dave.
Thanks, Mom. Okay.
No, we may need your help with the mic. The other mic. Stu, maybe. It's a loud whistle, and we're gonna get the mic working.
Hello, 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 hello.
That's not on.
Hello, hello. All right.
But it's not, that's a red light.
Yeah, I know.
How about that? I got it. I got it.
Okay, I think we have a working mic. No? It was close.
You have to like your.
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Paul Meehan. I was Kerry's nephew. Kerry was my Uncle Kerry. It's wonderful to see so many here to celebrate Kerry's life today. I know we have a full program, and I just want to say a few words about Kerry from the family's perspective, and perhaps from mine in particular. I figured I'd lead off with a few things some of you here may not know about Kerry. He loved New England, the region, the Celtics, the Red Sox. He talked about New England so much and with so much authority that one of my nephews thought for years that was where he was from. In particular, Kerry loved Martha's Vineyard, where we often spent family vacations together when Tom, Shay, and I were young. And I guess I should belatedly introduce my sister Shayla and my brother Tom. Sorry for that. He also loved animals and had pets throughout his life, both cats and dogs, including Pico, Coogie, and no fewer than 3 Nickies. The last Nicky was his devoted companion of many years. Many of you may have met him over the years, and is buried with him in Holden, Mass. As a pet owner myself, I always thought the love he showed his pets spoke highly of him. Uncle Kerry was a consistent presence and influence in my life, especially in the early years. Kerry was a part of so many family events, birthdays, holidays, vacations. He took me to my first Redskins game and to some of my early tennis tournaments. I never had the chance to be on any of Kerry's teams, but I did have the benefit of his coaching during my brief running career. I remember well the summer training plans Kerry drew up for me to follow a couple of summers when we were on vacation on Martha's Vineyard. Even when I was in junior high, I had an inkling of Kerry's coaching prowess. And I was so proud that he would do. I was so proud that he would take the time to draw up a program especially for me. I followed each plan to the letter, never doubting that they would lead me to great success. Roll the clock forward 35 years or so, and I finally decided it was time to run a marathon, something I'd wanted to do since watching Frank Shorter win at the '72 Olympics. Sure, there is no shortage of training plans to be found on the internet, but I thought, why bother wading through all of that? I'll just ask Kerry. Sure enough, he had an instant recommendation that worked great for me. And I know Kerry had a lasting impact on so many he taught and coached. Just last weekend, I ran into an old friend from BCC who was visiting from out of town. I knew he had run cross country at BCC, so I told him about Kerry, and after expressing his shock and sadness, his first response was, I was just thinking of him as I drove down here. I passed Van Cortlandt Park on the way and thought of Kerry and the races we ran there. And his recollection of those trips went far beyond the meets. He remembered how, when the meets ended, Kerry would take the team into the city to visit museums and see the sights. The races were of course memorable, but the experience went well beyond that. As I was putting my thoughts about Kerry together, before getting up here today, many things came to mind. Endless fount of knowledge, passionate coach, committed teacher, caring uncle, and if you look at the photo on the program, certainly handsome and well-dressed. And all those and more are accurate. But they describe him. They don't really explain They don't really explain why he meant so much to his family, students, and athletes. When I think about what made an important part of my life, two things in particular come to mind. First, anytime I'd see Kerry, I always asked what I was up to or what was coming up next in my life. And he was always genuinely interested in my answers. And more often than not, regardless of what it might be that I was into at the time, he would know something about it, maybe a lot. In fact, I'd often end up learning something new about something that I, up until then, had considered myself an expert on. And I doubt I'm the only one here today who would say this. Second, Kerry had a non-judgmental way of listening and asking questions that made you comfortable sharing. I saw this in his relationship with my daughter Susan, who joined our family as a teenager. Not the easiest time for such a change. When her mother and I became a couple over 20 years ago, Kerry engaged with her and made her feel welcome right from the start, and they stayed in touch up until the end. And I think it's these traits that made Kerry a wonderful uncle, as well as an inspiring coach and teacher. And I think they're a big reason there are so many people here today to honor his life. Thank you. I'll now pass the mic to Craig Lake.
Hi. Thanks for everyone for coming. I have so many great stories to share about Mr. Ward, or I guess I should call him Kerry now. It was always a little weird calling him Kerry because I called him Mr. Ward for so many years. So even, in my later years and his later years, I went back and forth. I don't think there was ever a lunch or phone call under 3 hours with Kerry. So I'll try to keep this brief, just as brief as he would. But bear with me, I'll try to kiss, as Kerry liked to say. Keep it simple, stupid. By the way, there is a list of phrases going around that Catherine Koza put together. He had a lot. Oh, somebody actually, she's brought them. Devin, someone else put it together. But he had so many phrases that I had never heard before that I hear later in life. Of course, keep it simple, maybe sweet, other people would say. But anyway, Kerry and I hit it off right away during my freshman year playing basketball. I recall one practice, he asked if I liked Elton John, and I said, why? And he said, well, you look like a tiny dancer. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, you look like a tiny dancer. And I snapped back at him and I said, well, you do it then. The whole court went silent. And I was very self-conscious and realized that I talked back, which you pretty much didn't do with him. And he mulled it over and kind of giggled and somehow tolerated it and went on to show me that I was playing basketball defense like this instead of like this. So everyone expected him to lay into me, but for some reason he got a kick out of me talking back and put up with me and just kind of chuckled that this 5'3", 100-pound girl had the nerve to speak back to him. He somehow let down some barriers with me that I think he didn't always do with others. I had a way of talking with him that was very direct, and we were just like two peas in a pod in a lot of ways. Anyway, basketball was my passion. I loved it. Having coached for years myself, it is rare to find a player or an athlete that cares as much as the coach does. Someone who lives and dies game to game, meet to meet. I was obsessed with basketball and later in running, and I could have ate, drank, slept, just like he could have. As most of you likely know, Kerry was a voracious reader. He pored over history books, current events, and of course, coaching books. He knew all of Mike Krzyzewski's plays from Duke and Dean Smith's from Carolina. And and all the drills because he went down and asked to sit on their practices. Also read every book he could get his hands on. And at Whitman, we did a lot of their exercises and drills. We even slapped the floor on defense like the Duke men's basketball team in the 90s. Following the two-time NCAA champions in the 90s. We felt so badass in doing it and confident in doing it. And that came from him. It raised our intensity and our focus. Kerry was a phenomenal coach. He never tired of learning and reading and giving us his knowledge and expertise. He also did more than just coach the sport, but also life. I'll get into that more later. After freshman year of basketball, Kerry told me I had to run cross country. I did not know what cross country was. I did know that running was always a punishment for every other sport I had ever played. I had done a million suicide drills at this point in life. Actually, one of my favorite suicide stories was when a girl on our basketball team kept showing up late to practice. At first, Kerry had her doing suicides for showing up late, but she kept coming late. So finally, he dragged a chair, very dramatically, got her a glass of water, told her to sit, while the rest of the team did suicides. She was never late again. Back to running. Let's just say I didn't love it at first. In my first cross-country race, my sophomore year, I didn't realize we had to run 3.1 miles on trails. I really didn't know what a 5K was. I was with the lead pack and kind of twisted my ankle on a branch. Considered my options. I was scared, I was tired, and I dropped out. I will say this. Kerry was so great at surrounding himself with phenomenal assistant coaches who were so loyal. Coaching can be a very, very lonely sport. Because again, you care so much. Your identity is wrapped up in it, and had a phenomenal staff. That day he let Carolyn give it to me. I learned very quickly, after almost costing us the team title that day, that dropping out was not okay to the rest of the team. I kind of thought of running as an individual sport. Kerry cured me of that very, very quickly. And I truly adopted the team mentality from then on out. He always said, dance with who brung you, meaning stick together as a team, work together as a team to make the worst runner a better runner. And also in life, stay loyal to those who got you where you are today. By the state meet, I finally had improved a little bit with running, and on the final straightaway, I was about to pass our number one runner, but I didn't. The team mentality had really kicked in for me at that point, and I let her beat me as I knew it meant so much more to her to be the top runner that day as a senior than it did for me as a sophomore. Even though I had a taste of success, not gonna lie, I hoped that I never had to run cross country again. Track was a different story. Going to the Penn relays was eye-opening. Seeing the college runners and seeing a full stadium of fans for track and field was like amazing. At the time, Whitman was the only team in Maryland that would go to meets outside of Maryland. Most teams didn't even compete outside of the county. Kerry took us to big-time competitive meets, talked to us about the Villanova runners and the legends. We sat where they sat, and of course stood under the clock to watch most of the best races. He always said, fast races make fast times. He was truly ahead of the rest of the coaches. It is no wonder he was named Coach of the Decade in the 90s. Sadly, we were going to meet up under the clock next weekend for a big reunion. What was very cool about Kerry is it wasn't just about the meets. He would also make sure when we traveled for a meet to show us things while we were there. He would take us to Rittenhouse Square and to see the Rocky Steps. It was an education as well. In cross country, we would drive up to Van Cortlandt Park. I don't think you would do that nowadays. I think I remember I'd gotten my license about 6 months previous and had this 4-speed Volkswagen Box and probably fit 4 people comfortably. We had probably 7 or 8. We'd go up to the Bronx, and he would also, after the meet, tour us around New York City. We would read at the same restaurant every year called America, near Washington Square Park, which is very much nowhere near the Bronx. It was magical for us high schoolers. Probably as a coach a little less awesome, but again, it was all about an education. On my first trip there to New York City with him, I can't recall how I did in that meet, but I do recall thinking everyone should be required to live here in New York City for a year. And I ended up, of course, following in his footsteps and coached cross country and track at Columbia University for 8 years. He definitely impacted this decision. He had such an impact on my life that I had hoped to do the same. Furthermore, Kerry was an extraordinarily loyal person. He, Carolyn, Bob, and Bill came to every single cross-country championship meet that I coached while at Columbia and Brown at Van Cortlandt Park to support me. Having them there meant the world to me. Having his support always meant the world to me. For me, Kerry wasn't just a coach, but also a father figure. My dad and I were not that close, and he really filled those shoes for me. With that said, one year, I remember running down to his classroom, sobbing, because my dad was picking me up to take me on an awesome trip to Carolina to see Duke men's basketball play and Carolina men's basketball play the next day. Got him out of middle class, he comes out, talks me back into going, because he was always looking after my best interest and kept that in mind. It goes without mention that Kerry was an amazing proponent for girls' sports in high school and equality for women in general. He began girls cross country at BCC. I believe that was the first women's cross country team in the state of Maryland. Yet still years later at Whitman, it was a total good old boys club. The other coaches, athletic director, and principal did not understand why Kerry would choose to coach the girls basketball over the boys basketball team. They offered him the boys' job several times and questioned him, but why would you want to coach the girls? People resented that the girls' team was so successful, way more successful than the boys' team. Whitman, in general, at that time, only supported the boys' teams. They would pay for the boys' banquets and not the girls' banquets, despite our winning record and their losing record. It was definitely not fair, and he did not like it, so we fought it together. We went even further as the cheerleaders didn't come to our games, but went to the boys' games. They made the boys cakes, pies, and posters and hung them up. And we didn't even have cheerleaders at our game. We were not getting cakes, pies, or posters. So he and I went to the principal and athletic director about it. And all they said was, well, this is how it is. This is how it's been done. This is how it will continue. But we refused to let it go. It was very unfair, so my mom, Kerry, and I went over Dr. Marco's head, the principal at the time, to the board of directors in Montgomery County. And they had to agree with us due to Title IX. So later, the cheerleaders, they were given the option to only make cakes, pies, and posters for both the girls and boys, or not at all. I didn't have a lot of great friends at this time in high school, because the boys were pissed. They weren't getting cakes, pies, posters, and brownies. And the girl cheerleaders obviously couldn't make them for both because they'd be baking full time. In addition, the cheerleaders had to start cheering at the girls' games. They did not like that either. Years later, I went back to watch a lot of Kerry's basketball teams play at Whitman, the new Whitman. that looks like a Nordstrom's without the dome. It was amazing to see the full crowd and the cheerleaders were there. They didn't know anything different. Kerry deserves all the credit for that, as he educated me to speak up and to make waves when something wasn't right. He championed girls' sports when not many people did back then, and he was very disliked for it. Kerry truly beat to his own drum. He made waves. He was unorthodox without apology. This is what made him such a standout coach, teacher, and mentor. He made such an impact on my life that I went on to coach for 16 years. But I never felt as great as he was. He was truly a legend, and I wish more than anything for him to be here with us right now to hear all this. You will hear from Dave Cianelli next, yet another athlete of his to turn to coaching, which is such a compliment to Kerry Ward. His influence, impact, and reach are far and wide. Kerry definitely had some of his favorites over the years, and he loved to tell stories. I don't know where you are, Gordon Oliver, but seriously, for us Whitmanites, I mean, this is like being in a room with a celebrity. The way he would tell stories, you almost felt like you got to know his former athletes. I can almost visualize when the BCC 4x8 team of Lori, Kathy, Carolyn, and Ellen broke the pen relays record and finished second by a hair at the pen relays. God, I was jealous. Of course, hearing of the past successes gave you confidence in his coaching as well. Kerry loved the psychology of coaching and was super intuitive. I recall him knowing that the sophomore basketball player, Lindsay Seawright, who was 6'1", but very lean and slight, likely couldn't play center in college. She needed to hone in on her dribbling skills to compete at the D1 level. As the senior point guard, he had to break it to me that he was moving her to the point guard position. The way he delivered this news was genius. He said, in order for you to get more three-point shots, we're gonna have Lindsay bring the ball down the court. It wasn't until years later he told me the real reason. At the state track meet my senior year, I kind of choked, finished third in the mile, a disappointing third in the 2 mile. The last race was the 800 meter. Of course, we won the 4x8, that was a given. Not my strongest race, the 800. Kerry refused to talk to me. He refused to look at me. I was so pissed off at this and so upset and hurt. But my nerves were gone because I was focused on this, and I led that race from start to finish. He was very clever in this way. I, of course, also took his Russian history and anthropology classes. These classes were fascinating. He taught, again, in an unorthodox way, which was very refreshing at Whitman, which was somewhat of a pressure cooker. Instead of having a final exam for anthropology as an educational experience, we drove down to hand out sleeping bags in the winter to the homeless population across the street from the White House. He loved the irony in that, homeless across from the president. I actually tried to give a man a pink sleeping bag. I got screamed at. Why in the hell would you give me this pink sleeping bag? I'm a man. That is forever etched in my memory. Anyway, he made such an impact on so many people's lives. I know there are many that could not make it today that are truly upset that they can't be here. Pascal Dobert being one of them. As I mentioned, Kerry certainly had his favorites over the years, and I was fortunate to be one of them. But if there's any question who is his true favorite, well, wasn't me. It was his dog, Nikki. He was so grateful for that dog and the means for giving her to him. I am happy that they are together now and resting in peace. A toast to a great mentor, a phenomenal coach, and loyal friend.
I have no expectation I'm going to beat that speech. However, I'm going to do my best. Would everyone from BCC please raise their hand? Whitman? 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 Very good. Woo! I'm Steve Schaffert. I am a 68 BCC grad and a very proud member of our teams. Now, the Whitman folks are okay too. My wife of 50 years is a 71 graduate of Whitman, so you're okay. We are all very lucky to bear witness to a great man. I have a few stories that I would like to pass along to everybody. I'm not going to get through this without reading it, so please bear with me. His senior year at BCC was 1952. And he told us a story, perhaps true, that on the last day of class, he drove his motorcycle up the staircase, across the first floor, and out the other side. A little chip on his shoulder, perhaps. His devotion to all of us as student athletes was very, very strong. One of my teammates, Dan Rice, reminded me recently that Mr. Ward, and I never knew Kerry. Mr. Ward, Coach Ward, absolutely. He reminded me that Coach Ward fought extremely hard against the principal and the football coaches at BCC to allow us to have to hold the very first pep rally in the stadium for cross country at BCC. And he went through hell to get that for us. Coach Ward was a very determined man. If you ever tried to guard him in a pickup basketball game and got run over on his way to a layup, you knew how determined he was. And he would do it without messing up his hair. He was a master at psychological warfare. At the beginning of my senior year, he told me to put the name of the boy who was going to win the state mile championship in my locker. Pasted in my locker. For 10 months, I looked at that damn name every day. Every time I opened the locker. So when we got to the state championships in the mile, as we rounded the last turn to the final straightaway, there was Coach Ward, looking as dapper as ever, calling out, "You have to go now. Pick it up." Now, if you haven't had the privilege of running a mile in competition, I will tell you that with 40 yards to go, your legs are jello, like mine are right now, and your arms feel like someone strapped a 40-pound suitcase on each wrist. Now, if you would, run with me for the last 40 yards. With 20 yards to go, your nemesis is right in front of you. With 10 yards to go, in your mind's eye, you see your gym locker. And it opens. And there's the name. So with Mr. Ward, Coach Ward's psychological understanding and a lot of help from my teammates, I beat that bastard by 2 steps. And besides my claim to fame of beating a gym locker, I was the first of 7 state mile champions that Mr. Ward coached. As we have on the display, he is the all-time winningest sports high school coach in Maryland history, by far the best. I hope you will support an idea that we have to see if we can get 2 identical plaques, one for BCC, one for Whitman, to go up in his honor. Oh, sorry. I have one more story to tell you if I can get through it. One day in my junior year, he handed me 5 paperbacks and told me to read them. I have never figured out how he knew I needed to read them. But maybe that is what a great teacher is. After several weeks, I returned them, and he had changed my life forever. I thank him every day. So if your children, your grandchildren, or someone asks you, what are the best things about your life? Proudly tell them that you knew Kerry Ward. We'll always celebrate his life. Thank you.
Tough act to follow. Ooh. First, I'd like to thank Shayla Meehan for putting this together, along with Bill Murphy, who did all the slideshows for us, collected all that information. Stu Nibley as well. They put in a lot of hours to put this together. So shout out to those 3. So Matt Jacobs, who is one of my teammates, he said, if I feel like I'm going to lose it, stick my hand in my pocket and pinch myself. I had never heard of that technique before. but I'll try it. I don't think I need that. So, yeah, Coach Ward, I called him Coach Ward pretty much through the 53 years that I've known him. I was at BCC and graduated in '73, but really our relationship was more, since '73 until now, as far as really getting to know him as a friend, more so than a coach. But I do have a story. I'm going to keep this short because Stu Nibley's got a thesis over there. And I asked him, hey, do I got to get a room here or something? I mean, he's got like 100 pages over there. Anyway.
We wrote them all, Steve.
So, we're going to Penn Relays, right? Penn Relays is all I heard about. Penn Relays. Unbelievable, right? Well, first year I went, when I was a junior, it was 1972, April. And so he was supposed to put the relay all in one car, Doug Brown's car. So we'd all be together. If we get lost, we all get lost together. Okay, well, his car filled up, distance people and stuff. He had no room. So Coach Ward says, well, just ride with me. So I climb into his Carmen Ghia, that cool Carmen Ghia that he had. You remember that? And he says, okay, I'll take you and we'll see him up there, right? I'm going, well, I didn't, I'd never been there before. I figured, okay, Coach's got to know. So I'm driving, well, I'm not driving, he's driving, and I'm just holding on. Because if you ever ridden with him, you know what I'm talking about. So we get up there, and, around the stadium, it's just crazy. There's thousands of people. If you've ever been to Penn Relays before, athletes, spectators, I mean, it's just crazy. And here I am, I think I was 16 or something, and we're driving up to where the big wall is, and on the other side of the wall is the paddock. Well, that wall and the gates are closed. You can't get through there. And we're supposed to race in like 15 minutes. And I don't know where my team is. And my uniform's in the back of Doug Brown's car, in the trunk. So I'm like freaking out. Okay, here's my first time to Penn, and I'm not even going to be able to run. So Coach Ward leaves me off right there and says, okay, on the other side of that 20-foot gate that's locked, that's 3 inches thick, go and find your teammates, and they'll be there, right? I went, all right. I got out of the car, takes off, and I'm like, okay, I got to go. I'm wading through, all the Jamaican teams are there, and I'm like, whoa, what did I get myself into? So I get up to the gate, and it's like, literally, it's like a 20-foot gate that's locked. You can't get through it. They don't let anybody through. And I turn around, and there's Doug Brown. Unbelievable. Out of all the people, he's sitting there. I go, okay, Doug, give me my uniform. I'm ready. We'll get in. The uniform's still in the back of my car, and it's 4 blocks down in a parking garage. 4 blocks from the stadium. All right, so he's got his uniform on. I just follow him, and we're sprinting for 4 blocks. Yeah, exactly. We're sprinting for 4 blocks to the parking garage. We run under. He opens the trunk. I just change right there in the parking garage into my uniform. Sprint back, and then we got to go in the stadium. We can't go in where we were. We got to go in the back stretch and then work our way across underneath the clock and then to where the paddock is. And Matt's already over there. I think Carl Porthel was there. And it's like they're moving up, and basically we're supposed to be going out in like 30 seconds. And they got 2 guys. So, you know, they're going to just get disqualified because they don't have 4 runners. So we get through there and we're just pushing everybody aside. We finally get up to where we are, and they just walked us out. And I was like, oh my God. Some dude with a basket gave me a baton because I was the leadoff. And I didn't have time to think. So, you know, they shove you out into your lane. And I remember I better pinch myself. See if this works. Okay, so I'm out in my lane. And there's like there's 40,000 people there, right? And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I don't even know which way to run on the track, how to hold the baton, who I'm supposed to hand off to.
What race it is?
It was like 4x1, I think. And I look up in the stands, and I see Kerry Ward. Out of all the people, he stands up. He's got that brown corduroy jacket with the suede elbow things. Very cool. He stands up and he just gives me one of these. And so then I was like, okay, everything's fine. And we actually ran very well that day. But man, that was my first experience at Penn, and I was sort of freaked out. Kerry, I never called him Kerry really. Well, maybe in later years a little bit just to kind of fool around, but I always called him Coach Ward. You know, there's always one person benching. There's only one person, or there's always, if you think back in your life, and sometimes you got to think way back. Like for me, you know, I'm pretty old, so I got to think way back. But there's always somebody. It might be a coach, it might be a sibling, it might be a parent, it might be a friend. But there's always someone that has a really positive influence on what you end up doing and who you end up being. It's working. So that, you know, that person for me was Coach Ward. So much so that this is my 42nd year of coaching track and field. Which is, you know, pretty crazy.
And winning championships. Pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, everything that I have learned about coaching, you know, came from Coach Ward. You know, I'd call him up, but if you call him up, you better be ready for like 2 or 3 hours. There's no getting off the phone. You can set it down and you can go fix some food and come back. He'll still be talking. And it always went from track, and then it would go to politics, then geography, and then fast cars, and all this other stuff. Some guy at Oxford that did some study, and I'm like, okay. That stuff kind of went over my head a little bit, but the guy was, you know, the depth of his knowledge was just incredible about so many different things. You know, I'll miss him, as we all will, but his influence, it lives on with us. Kerry Ward was unconventional. I mean, that's putting it mildly. And I tried to sort of model what I did as a coach after that, with still being myself. You know, I didn't change who I was, but I used a lot of the same things that he used to be successful, in a different sort of way. So one more story and then I'm done, and then Stu, you better get a pillow. Okay, so like I said, Coach Ward was very unconventional, but the students really loved him because he was sort of a rebel. You know, the administration didn't really like him. And I think just because he was different and successful. So I got this bright idea. It seemed bright at the time. Today it seems not so bright. So about 6 of us from the team, we think, okay, you know what the team room needs, our locker room? It needs carpet. So we decided, okay, we're going to do wall-to-wall carpet in our locker room at BCC. So we go up on a Sunday. Now this is spring of '73, so nothing's locked. Nobody locked anything back then. We go in the administration building. We go up to the counselor's office. There's a nice 10 by 12 rug in there. Perfect. Move the furniture, roll it up, walk out, put the furniture back, close the door, walk down to our locker room. I knew a carpet guy. He comes in that night, he slices it up, and he had all these remnants. He sewed it all together. By Monday morning, we had wall-to-wall carpet in our team room, in our locker room. Coach Ward walks in on Monday afternoon, and he wasn't even surprised. He looks around, says, "Looks pretty good." Seriously. I thought he would like blow a gasket. And he knew looking at the carpet, he could see the pieces, the tan colored pieces that were the carpet from the counselor's office. He knew. He didn't say anything, but he knew. And no one ever said anything. I don't think they ever missed it. But that's the sort of stuff that we did. I mean, it was, I don't know, it was a little harmless, maybe a little bit harmless, but a little bit of harm. But, you know, we didn't hurt anybody doing it. But that's sort of the experiences that you remember. You know, Coach Ward was a fantastic coach. Everybody that ran for him or played basketball for him improved. But the team was always the number one priority. And that's what, for me, taking that in my coaching career and making the team the priority. And to me, that's sort of been his legacy to me, and hopefully, you know, my tribute to him. So that's all I got. Next up is Stu Nibley get comfortable.
I don't know if I need this or not. You've been warned. I had asked Shayla, how long are these people before me going to go? Oh, 5 minutes. But I have a very long one. She said, fine, we want to hear it. So I've been waiting 50 years to do this, to talk about my relationship with Kerry and what he meant to me and to our teammates and so forth. So I apologize, it is long. I'll try to shorten it if I can. If you need to go do something, get a haircut, or you got some surgery or something you need to get done, please just don't all leave at the same time. And send some cats and dogs in, but get some drinks, yes. Dave and Matt, that's an interesting technique. Pinch yourself. My wife has told me to do something else to myself, but I don't think pinch was the word she used, as I remember. My wife lives here. First, who am I and why am I up here? I am Stu Nibley Sr., known to 2 grandsons as just Big. I graduated from the class of 71 at Bethesda Chevy Chase, BCC. We got some 71s over here, and that in Dale. I was extraordinarily fortunate to have been co-captain of both the cross-country team and a track team, and I also played co-captain of the basketball team there. And the running was under Kerry. I speak not only for myself today, but for our BCC running distance teammates. And in that I cover 1968 to 1974. I was there until 71, but then I ran with a bunch of the people here until 74. And then after, we all hung out together. It's been amazing. We all went through the Kerry Ward boot camp, as I like to call it. 37 of us now, we remain in constant contact. And I played basketball, and we don't remain in contact. People would think a team sport like that, you must remain in contact. No. And you heard from Dave Gianelli and Craig and others about the team building that Kerry did. I'll talk some about that. But it was amazing that we remain in contact in a sport like cross country, and are the best friends that I've ever had. Fortunately, Kerry was able to come to a reunion that we have every 1 or 2 years, just in October. We had it at my house, and he sat in his easy chair in the corner of the entrance room of our house, giving audience to the members of our group, mostly in 2x2s. And I wouldn't say it was Noah loading his ark, but he was more like the Pope giving audience to his grateful followers. There was no arrogance or hierarchical feeling projected on his part. His mind seemed to be very typically razor sharp and amazing recall of details. He just enjoyed reviewing the news articles and photos each pairing put before him and discussing wonderful memories. So that's who I am and why I'm here, speaking for the team as well as myself. But second, I want to make sure we thank the Meehan's, Tom and Marin, Kerry's sister Marin, and Shayla, who has arranged this, Paul, who spoke, and a number of other people who helped arrange this. We owe a particular debt to Bill Ring, BCC class of 69, who's not here today, and Carolyn Hughes Brady, one of his, probably, who spent more time with, yeah, let's have Carolyn. We spent more time with him probably than anybody else throughout the years. And you've heard from the speakers here. We owe a special thanks, particularly to Bill Murphy, Bill, who put all of the slideshow together, collected everything. Thank you, Bill. You did a fantastic job pulling this together. And then Shayla, of course, who pulled it all together. So thanks, Shayla, as well. Our group of 37 and growing former distance runner teammates at BCC and some who went to other high schools include some of the best runners Kerry ever coached. Please raise your hand if you're here. Gordon Oliver. Gordon, where's Gordon? Darren's back here. Class of 72, Ken Stanger, BCC, 72. Peter Jensen couldn't be here, 72. Peter Slevin is here, flew in from Chicago. Princeton, cross-country and 2-mile champion, class of 70, what were you, 74? 74, professor at Northwestern now. Tom Seither and Mike Termela, 1970, could not be here. Steve Schaffer, 1968. And me, 1971. And don't get mad, you sprinters, Paul Tilley and Matt Jacobs. You guys, the sprinters are here. From 1970, Paul, and Matt was 1973? 73. All of the people I just mentioned here finished either first or second in the Maryland State Track Championships in their respective events. Extraordinary, Kerry. Impossible, Kerry. Kerry Ward did that. So I've divided my tribute, unfortunately, it's long, as I said, but here today into 2 categories. First, a personal tribute from me, focusing on 2 key experiences I had with and through Kerry that I believe had a profound impact on shaping the direction of my personal life. And then a general tribute, focusing on the way that Kerry positively influenced thousands of students and athletes he taught. For my personal aspect, along with my wife Liz, who's here, hi, who has everything, as you can see, except for good judgment in selecting men. Kerry has been the most influential person in my life. Kerry Ward didn't save my life, but he made it. He made it into a form that could realize much of the potential that lay within me, as he has for so many here. Some of what I will relate now may sound quite dramatic. My voice is a little bit gone from the allergies, I think. To some of you, it may even sound melodramatic, but I've been waiting for 50 years to tell my story in truth, Kerry's story, about the extent to which he positively influenced the direction of my life. And I've told myself for 50 years that I would be doing this. The first incident of the 2 I will talk about. When I was 14, my father shot himself in the head, and he lived blind. He missed his brain, and he lived many more years blind. He moved in and out of institutions for many years, and we were required as a family to visit him. And I hated going to the, quote, institution, as my mother called it. I hated it. It was like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which Kerry made me read. My brother and another brother had problems. My mother did a great job, not having graduated from college, and eventually became a tenured professor at American University. After several other failed attempts, when I was in my 20s, my father eventually succeeded. So I had a difficult time in those years. I joined the BCC track team my sophomore year, and I was 16 years old, and Kerry took considerable notice of my potential as a distance runner and basketball player. But he noticed and commented that I seemed to be fatigued a lot, sluggish. And I quite innocently and naively responded, "Coach, I can't sleep. I'm awake much of the night." What was that thing Finch said? I don't know why it's happening. And I really didn't know why it was happening. In fact, I never made the connection between my father's and my adolescent problems and my sudden sleeping disorder until my father succeeded in his attempts in my 20s, late 20s. Kerry knew, as a master intuitor and diviner of adolescent psyche, he not only knew the cause of my sleeping disorder, he grew committed to do what he could do to harden my resilience, not just as a distance runner, but as a human being preparing for life. I want to note his treatment of me was anything but kid glove treatment. He more than once kicked me off the team for not being committed enough to distance running. But many, many more times, he had me sit up with him in his little office up behind the BCC gym, where I would watch him work, and we would discuss life and overcoming challenges it brought. My second example of Kerry Ward epiphany I had occurred after my freshman year in college, as my athletic career seemed to be taking off. I injured myself very badly with complex micro tears in my Achilles tendon. And in those days, you might remember the treatment, the sports medicine we had was put it in a whirlpool and take a salt tablet. No saying was ice or any stretching or any of that stuff. So after 6 months of futile medical failures, we had no real sports medicine then, as I said. The doctors announced the obvious. They could do nothing, and my running and basketball careers were over for the foreseeable future. I was suddenly in the vortex of an identity crisis. I had always defined myself as an athlete, not just as a person. I was an athlete, aspiring to become a nationally elite athlete. And who was I if I was no longer an athlete? I was lost. But I will never forget the very moment. I can still see it today when I sat in the university library, despondent and distraught, realizing I was no longer an athlete or who I really was, and looking up at the ceiling of the high-arching main reading room and thinking, wait a minute, I don't need to stop using the skills that Coach Ward taught me. It's not about the specific activity you are pursuing. It is about the process. Take that process of highly focused orientation and unrelenting discipline you learned from Coach Ward and apply it to a different end goal. I know I want to be a true academic, intellectual, like Coach Ward. I want to really learn about philosophy, literature, art, music, architecture, be a Phi Beta Kappa recipient, a Rhodes Scholar. And upon graduation, I succeeded in 2 out of those 3. I was a nominee for Rhodes Scholar, but didn't get it. The point is, I've been taught by Coach Ward how to establish and employ a process of goal orientation and pursuit that could be productively applied to any aspect of life. He had taught me about, guided me to life, not just sports. A few years, Kerry and I spent a great deal amount of time together in recent years, the last few years. Liz and I lost our youngest son, 25 years old, 2 years ago. Which side do you pinch?
Anywhere.
Kerry helped me through this difficult period, just as he had when I was in high school. That is, he didn't address the issue directly. Rather, he steered me towards mechanisms and experiences to put the events in context and use the resilience he had taught me to build. And for my part, I tried to help him as he worked through his aging process, which wasn't beautiful a lot of the time. During our last few years together, he recounted a lot of stories to me, stories I had never heard before about his teaching, coaching, and many anecdotes about many of you in here. Yeah, okay. Okay, some of you. And he told me stories about his family and growing up, and I benefited from hearing those stories. I was so grateful that I had the opportunity to reconnect with him and show him, if not tell him fully, how much he had meant to me. So thank you very much. That's a brief glimpse into the profound way examples Kerry influenced my life. But please allow me to speak more broadly about the many facets of Kerry's personality that influence so many others, students and athletes, in ways and degrees that, to my knowledge, no other high school mentor ever has. So how does one speak meaningfully about the enigma that is Kerry Ward? I started thinking about him, and I went through the scores of photos, just hundreds of photos that Bill found, and the Facebook posts. Bill had pulled the Facebook posts, some of which I want to read to you from students and athletes. They're so cool to hear what he meant to them. And I thought of the metaphor of a prism for Kerry, because I always used to use that when I was a lawyer with my younger lawyers, that, have you looked at the problem? Have you really looked at it? And this applies to Kerry. When you look at a prism, and you first look at it, it shows blue, it's blue light, but then you gradually turn it, and it's green, and then it's red, and then it's yellow and orange. And Kerry had all of these facets to him. He wasn't simple, he was extremely complex. And I distilled them down in my mind into 7 that I'll try to address by using quotes from people if I can. The first we already heard about from Craig and from Dave and others is he's the supreme motivator. He was the supreme motivator. Number 2, he was the ultimate forger of teams and teamwork. Number 3, he was the daunting intellect and brilliant creator. Number 4, the masterful teacher. Number 5, the practical joker. He was a practical joker. But 6, the paradoxical enigma of him, he was the stubborn, irascible Kerry Ward, too. If he didn't want to do something, he wasn't going to do it. Number 7, the compassionate Kerry Ward. You're going to be happy to hear I'm going to skip some of this. As the supreme motivator on the team, he motivated people in ways I'd never seen before. And I want to give you some quotes, as I said. First one, my teammate, as we learned about Kerry's death, we started to exchange emails. and it was amazing what poured in from our distance running group. First one's from Kent Staver, 72. His memory will live on through each of us, a coach for all seasons. That really registered with me, Kent. I love that one. Here's one that came from Peter Jensen, class of 72, who was a great runner for us. Recent thoughts. As I was suffering while doing sets of fingertip pull-ups in the windy, misty, cold weather, I could not help but thinking of our 6-mile time trials in the cold rain. Yes, I agree, our warrior training approach to life has shaped our lives in more ways than we will ever know. A tribute to our mentor, Kerry Ward. George Back had a whole, and his brother's here right now. George was class of 73, ran with Gordon and me. He has an entire stream of consciousness that I love, and I think the runners will also love. I recall, this is from George, I recall his mantra, focus on LSD, long, slow distance. The Lydiard super shoes, talk of studying in England or Oxford or Cambridge, striving for performance excellence, John Wooten of UCLA basketball, the Bowerman training philosophy, incorporation into training of physiology principles that introduced us to lactic acid, interval training, running tradition, Emal Zetapak, I learned about it, Bob Wheeler, illegible written handwriting on handouts in the blackboard. Everybody's got the thumb up on that one. Colorful vocabulary. Nibbly, what the F? He said that to me. What are you doing? Emphasis on summer training to establish running base. Assistant coaches Bill Ring and Charlie Stout. Carolyn also was mentioned there. Introduction of girls cross country track with Title IX. And running down to BCC to Georgetown to do an interval workout on an outdoor board track and the subsequent freezing rain and trips to Annapolis and the Penn Relays. Peter Slevin, who's here, I mentioned, 1974. Thinking of Kerry Ward all these years later, who but a psychology teacher would take Nietzsche's comment, that which does not kill me makes me stronger, and turn it into a wry comment to his teenage runners when they whined about a workout. I mentioned that he, number 2, was the ultimate forger of teams and teamwork. No person has ever done more for Montgomery County, and actually the state of Maryland, as Steve said, than Kerry Ward. I suspect every person in here knows that he won, as the coach, 16 high school championships in 3 sports with boys and girls at 2 different schools. Unbelievable. This is one I really like about his teamwork. And and this is one of the cool things, it came from a runner who was not one of the top runners, and this is what he wrote to us. Michael Kramer in 1972. This stood out to me. After running Easterns, which is the Van Cortlandt thing you've heard about, which was a highlight for me, and I did decently as 6th man, but Kerry somehow thought I had let him down, or I think he thought erroneously that I hadn't finished the race. Anyway, we were all sitting in a classroom, and he started announcing the county meet runners, and he said he was going to leave me off. I was devastated, but Peter Jensen spoke up, and then others, that I should run, and Kerry relented. I'm sure no one else remembers this, but I share it as tribute to my teammates because it meant a lot to me at the time, and it still does to this day. This is the part I like. Of course, maybe that was Kerry's bonding tactic. You never know with him. And Kerry gave up because the biggest point to him was that you support your team, as Craig says. You do that, and if you guys are going to take that position against me, the way Craig did about playing defense and Tiny Dancer, that's what I want to see. The third facet of the Kerry Ward prism that I saw a lot was the daunting intellect and brilliant creator. Kerry motivated young minds to pursue knowledge, imagination, conviction. There was not a topic I could raise with him that he had not researched, read voraciously about, same word you used, Craig, and could talk about for hours. He and I engaged in extensively wide-ranging discussions the last few years. We would talk, or rather, he would talk, and I would not, and mutter, I was thinking the same thing. About physics, robotics, politics, brain studies at Johns Hopkins University, but most important to him, about Dean Smith and North Carolina basketball, about which I could also talk a good bit, and Gino Ariama and Connecticut women's basketball. He would go on and on. In fact, Carolyn was after Kerry was in the hospital with Bill Ring, and they called me and said, "You want to talk to Kerry?" She held the phone up, and I said, Kerry, you're not going to believe this, but I watched the Connecticut women's basketball game last night. I knew you'd want me to do that. And they said he did a fist bump. No, he didn't. Kerry and I used to meet at the Barnes & Noble bookstore in Bethesda here. You know, a big one that was there before we got another clothing store that we needed anthropology. You know. But he and I would walk to the second floor of the Barnes & Noble, back to the coffee shop, you know, that's in the back there, through the stacks of books, and he would start pointing to books, commenting, oh, that's Neil deGrasse Tyson's third book. Not quite as good as, on the Pluto Files, not quite as good as his first two. And there's Mornings on Horseback by David McCullough. And McCullough got a few things wrong about Teddy Roosevelt. And I just sit there and go, I read Catcher in the Rye and Hamlet once. With him, just kind of walking behind him. We had great times. But two of the people who wrote things about him as students, both named Chris. They're different Chris's, I presume. Sheer brilliance. Has and will always remain with me. Peace, Kerry Ward. This Chris, just heard about this, such an amazing human, massive influence for me, then, now, and forever. Never met anyone that can match his level of intelligence, brilliant creativity, and huge level of care for all students and athletes. I've always cherished having him in my life and will never forget you. He was the master teacher. And here I'm just going to read some quotes, because some of these are really fantastic. They came from people. Carol, we're using first names because they had first names in the post, so we can do that. I am a lawyer, so. Anyway. Mr. Ward was a fabulous teacher. He inspired the rebellious me to attend class and do well. William, I had him for history, and he would play basketball with us, took us to restaurants in DC and Bethesda from BCC in the mid to late 60s, still rode his motorcycle. My recollection may be off, but it was 1952, BCC. No surprise he won so much as a coach. James, I had him in the BCC for U.S. history, and he brought it to, all caps, life. Then there's a story here. I'm not going to read it because it's long, but it's an incredible story from a woman that wasn't paying attention in class. And Kerry took some books, she says, gave her a bunch of books that she might be interested in. And it was about a Underground Railroad location in BCC, behind the Avalon Theater in Connecticut, in a house, and she went to talk to the people, and they had no idea, and there was a secret door, and all of this stuff, and she said, it was the first time ever I was motivated to learn, and it changed my life, finding out all about this Underground Railroad and what had existed there. It's an incredible story she tells. Colleen, rumor has it, we heard, he rode a motorcycle through the science building when it was the second floor, actually. Morgan, he taught me how to write a paper when I was at Whitman. I still use that technique today. What a great teacher. And then they get more interesting. He was a great teacher. He made us think. This one I love. I remember observing the gorillas at the zoo for his class. That's it. That's it. I assume that was not POTC, which I saw a lot. Anybody know what POTC is that he taught? Problems of the 20th century. I thought it was ROTC. I said, no, that's not kidding. Problems of the 20th century. I assume that observing the gorillas was not POTC, but it was anthropology, probably. Let's see what they do here. I took anthropology from him, too. It was the class that led me to major in that. David, this is a great one, too. David, memorable. He said he quit smoking by locking himself in a closet with a carton of cigarettes. Is that Kerry? I'm not going to smoke anymore. I'm so sick of cigarettes. Take the direct way. Carlos, on June 5th, 1968, shortly after midnight, Robert F. Kennedy was shot. Who's Robert F. Kennedy? This is Robert F. Kennedy. He did want to be a Kennedy. Mr. Ward brought a TV to class so we could all participate in the news. Best teacher at BCC.
I was in that class when he did that.
She was in that class when he did that.
Oh,
Did it affect you?
oh yeah.
She'll never forget. Great, thank you. What's your name?
Susie Arthur.
Okay, you are Jennifer Aniston?
Yeah, right. This is Jennifer.
Susie Arthur, okay. So she was in the class.
Yeah.
True story. Dan Reeks, American University. Dan is back here. It was All-Met Coach of the Year, Sherwood High School, cross country. So here's yet another coach. He ran for Kerry. Kerry coached both American University and BCC when I and Gordon were running, and Dan was running there. Dan and I still are best friends. We don't run much anymore. We walk a lot. We walk. Dan says, Kerry was one of my coaching mentors. I still use workouts he recommended. He was a great judge of talent and people. Fifth, and it gets faster here. Fifth, the paradoxical enigma. We have to face this. The stubborn, irascible Kerry Ward. We're compelled to address the paradoxical mix that was Kerry Ward. I have talked about Kerry's unparalleled ability to motivate, but we must also acknowledge the world was gifted with Kerry in a confounding paradoxical mix. A mix that, on not infrequent occasions, evidenced a wall of intolerance. Intolerance of the ignorant, intolerance of the unmotivated, intolerance of the lazy, intolerance of the effete core of impudent snobs. A little Spyro Agnew reference there. Intolerance of those who felt entitled, intolerance of injustice, and of course most, intolerance of almost any type of authority. I think there are probably some of you out there who would say he was intolerant at times for no particular reason. Why is Coach so pissed off at us? Why is he making us run 5 more 440s now in the cold rain? Just do it. In fact, I wanted to talk about, we had worked on, Shayla and Marin, working with a social worker that had gotten to know him and was working with him towards the end of his life. And I talked to her quite a bit at certain times, and in the second conversation she said, boy, he's kind of stubborn, isn't he? He's not going to do anything he doesn't want to do. I said, you got him pegged right there. So how do we make him do what he wants to do? Anyway, he was the sixth aspect was the practical joke. Dave told the story about the rug. I was going to mention that, the rug in the locker room. He also told me, I don't know if you know about this, he had a little gym, a little office up in the back of the BCC gym. And he was there, and I sat with him all the time back there, you know, for a lot of reasons, and we just do things. He told me this only recently, I didn't know this. He had tapped a phone into the athletic director's phone line so that he could have free long distance and free calls. He said I never knew about it. He said, yeah, I used to call all over and talk to Dean Smith. He did talk to Dean Smith. He tell the story of calling up and getting Dean Smith on the line. Dean put the phone down and got his lunch and came back. But I was up there also in his office once when I had to get to see his cross-examination of Hassan Zareski. Hassan was a little Iranian runner, ran like this, and he didn't like me. Well, he liked me a lot, but I used to give him wedgies and wet willies all the time as I'd run. And he used to say, God damn it, Nibbly, you're an Astrodome. And that's when the Astrodome had just been built. So he'd go, you're an Astrodome. So we discovered there was a complaint filed about Hassan, and I was up with Kerry in his office. Hassan was either 19 years old or 43. He looked 43, but we couldn't tell. And he said, no, I have this. This is what I have. Because Kerry's just looking at this thing and well, we have this complaint that you're too old to be running on JV. And no, it's not true. So he looked at me and said, what do you think's doing? I go, well, let's let it go. You know, it's got to go. So the last one was Jay Sherman, class of, was he 73 or 74? 74. Jay Sherman tells a great story. This is Kerry too. Kerry got into a fight, oh surprise, with administration, right? They got in a fight with Dr. Marco and the athletic department. He had made some money doing a charity thing with the runners, and the athletic department wanted the money. That's for us. So he was not going to give it to him. So his solution, he got a track meet made up in New York City and just spent all the money. So there was no money, sorry. The seventh and final facet for me of Kerry has been talked about already is his compassion, which seems very incongruent at times with his, his irascible, stubborn nature. But he really was. And the two places I saw it dramatically, one's already been mentioned. That's Nikki, his dog. I had the occasion to take Nikki on the last vet visit with him. And had never seen him like that. I mean, he was crying, he was a mess. He told me the long story about how Tom had arranged me and Tom to get the dog and how special, and he vowed he was going to get it again, get a dog like that again. It really was. He told me about taking him to New York City, taking him everywhere. it was really fascinating to watch that with him, and see how touched he was. The second person or being that he really felt for was Charlie Stout. Charlie was the Mr. Distance Running in the area for many years, 20, 30 years. He ran a newsletter that we all read, and he came and volunteered for Kerry out of the blue. He volunteered and stayed by Kerry's side. Nicest guy. Yeah, if you didn't want to tell Kerry something, you go tell Charlie. See if he might take the message to Kerry. But he was very concerned that Charlie hadn't gotten the proper recognition and that we should be thinking about a memorial for Charlie. It was very touching, and I had never seen that level of side of Kerry. To summarize, for me, I've been trying to think of how to summarize all of this, and then just sat down the other day and wrote a paragraph that brought all of those together. For me, Kerry Ward was the supreme motivator, the ultimate forger of teams and teamwork, a daunting intellect with an impossibly intuitive, visceral ability to decipher the adolescent persona by driving searingly deep into the soul of the student or athlete, almost as if he possessed night vision goggles or an MRI scanner that would identify true potential in a human being, to isolate the inert possibilities that lay within each person, with an incomprehensible ability to reach in and pull those possibilities out to the surface and to expose them not only to the world, but more importantly to the student athletes themselves. He was an enigma who was at once compassionate, caring, and at the same time an intolerant ranter, a prankster at heart with amazingly informed views about world events. He could teach like no other, and he did. He was my Yoda, and for others he was Taylor Swift. Truly amazing. A mighty inspirational torch has flickered out. Rest in peace, our good coach, teacher, mentor, friend, Kerry Ward.
Just want to thank everybody for coming. Oh, wow. How did you do that? Today it was so great to hear from everyone who spoke, and really appreciate all of being here. It's quite a crowd. So please stay, feel free to stay, and then enjoy some food and drink, and share your Kerry stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.